In the Oak Park Temple recently traveled to Washington, D.C. to visit the National Holocaust Museum and the National Museum of African American History and Culture, and they did so together.
Indeed they did, and Roz is here to share this wonderful journey with us. Roz.
It really was, guys. I call this putting unity in community because it's about building bridges. These folks from the African American community and the Jewish community started the weekend as two groups. They ended as one. Their story actually began several years ago after the Charleston, South Carolina church shooting.
It was about Father's Day of that year, 2015, and we put out a call for a unity service, and people kind of flooded from Oak Park into West Garfield Park.
Reverend Hatch and I had the opportunity to travel to Israel together, and during that trip, we got to know each other pretty well. We started talking about things we could do to bring our communities together.
They both agreed that travel would be a wonderful way to do that, and what better way than a trip to learn each other's stories and histories. The weekend in D.C. began on a Friday afternoon when the group of 28 met for the first time at the National Holocaust Museum.
This country is so divided by so many things, by color, by race, by ethnicity, by gender, and anything and everything we do that helps bridge those gaps and help people see one another as just other people is what we need.
Upon entering the museum, everyone is given an identification card with the name and information of an actual person who experienced the Holocaust. You move through the exhibit in chronological order: Hitler's rise to power, anti-Semitic propaganda, and the horrors of the final solution. It was powerful, emotional, and enlightening. The majority of the group went on this journey with no preconceived notions. Whatever was going to happen was going to happen. And many of them were very surprised by what did happen.
What started to echo in my mind was what's happening in our country now.
All you see is shoes, and on the back wall it says this was the only thing that they didn't burn, and it just touched my heart when I saw that.
To show how much we're similar, to show how much our backgrounds of what our ancestors went through were so much alike in the same hatred and power.
The day ended on a positive note with Shabbat services at Temple Micah and a growing comfort level among the group. And at that service, the group discovered another similarity: music, singing, and joyful spirituality in prayer. Now, tomorrow, we'll explore the National Museum of African American History and Culture and how everybody processed this whirlwind trip.
Temple and New Mount Pilgrim Baptist Church in West Garfield Park recently traveled together to Washington, D.C.
Yeah, yesterday we saw their experience at the National Holocaust Museum. Roz is here now to share their journey at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Roz?
And even though that first day was long and in some cases emotionally draining, many members of the group stayed up late talking about their experience at the Holocaust Museum, the commonalities within their cultures, and the anticipation of what they discover at the African American Museum. With the Washington Monument overlooking its symbolic structure, the 2-year-old National Museum of African American History and Culture is still the hottest ticket in town. The group started with a prayer outside the entrance.
Bless us especially with openness of heart.
The tour began in the lower level with the origins of the Atlantic slave trade, working through the colonial era, antebellum South, Civil War, and freedom. With authentic artifacts and graphic images, it was not an easy exhibit to see. The atrocities at the Holocaust Museum were very difficult for the group, but they found the exhibits at the African American History Museum just as disturbing for different reasons.
You kind of feel as an African American and knowing your own history, why would someone want to do that to your ancestors? But then you look and see that it's not only your ancestors, but it's also a whole nother race of people.
Walked into one of the railroad cars that was used, stuffed with people to transport them to the concentration camps. And then the next day, I go to the African American Museum and see the schematic drawings of the slave ships. The bottom of the ships were just packed, stuffed like that railroad car.
I
was standing in line, and an older guy, he comes up and he asked me, what exhibit is this? I'm like, this is the Emmett Till exhibit. And so he said, who's Emmett Till? How did you not know who Emmett Till is? It made me remember how much I did not know about Holocaust and Jews and what they went through.
The upper floors are a celebration of African American culture, highlighting decades of music, film, television, and pop culture, including Chuck Berry's Cadillac Eldorado. The final stop of the trip was to Sunday morning service at Ebenezer AME Church in Maryland. The takeaway from this trip?
To get into somebody else's story and their narrative, I think, goes a long way toward building understanding.
It's not about changing the world. It's about changing one person at a time.
And both groups agreed they wanted to continue to build relationships between the church and the synagogue, but to let things develop organically, not to force the issue. In fact, the Sunday after the horrific events in Pittsburgh, several members from New Mount Pilgrim came to a special peace and prayer service at Oak Park Temple, showing unity. It was very touching. I was at that service, and there were people from the mosque in Villa Park. There were people from the Christian community. Everybody came together, and that's what this is all about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Finding all the commonalities between everybody.
Proof that we have more in common than the things that separate us from
And we
us.
do.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thank you so
To
much.
bring up something while we have you here, you may remember several months ago, Roz took part in a special trip to Washington, D.C. This was with members of Chicago's New Mount Pilgrim Missionary Baptist Church, as well as the Oak Park Temple.
Yeah, Roz did a special series called Unity in the Community, and this morning there is an update on that, Roz.
I was lucky enough to go to New Mount Pilgrim Church last night for a very special service where the two groups got together once again. Now, this service was part of a week-long celebration for the upcoming dedication of the Sankofa Peace Window this Sunday. It honors those who lost their lives to gun violence in Chicago: Darian Albert, Laquan McDonald, Dia Pendleton, Blair Holt, and Demetrius Griffin Jr. Pastor Marshall Hatch invited Rabbi Max Weiss to give a sermon.
We'd like to have our friends here from the Oak Park Temple to be here during this week of the Sankofa Revival, to be here during Black History Month, to be in this beautiful space in the week dedicating these new windows. I have to be honest and say I am a bit overwhelmed.
It was a very moving service that included the New Mount Pilgrim Baptist Church Choir, as well as Zimre Ham, one of Oak Park Temple's choirs. The service concluded with everyone singing "We Shall Overcome." It was a very unifying and powerful evening.
Oh, it looks like it. And a beautiful tribute and dedication, too, especially with the stained glass.
You know, I talk about more in common. The rabbi's sermon, he talked about the holiday of Purim and Queen Esther, and that story has so many parallels between the Jewish and African-American communities. It deals with hate and prejudice and anti-Semitism, but it ends up in unity.
There you go.
It's a lovely way to focus on what we have in common.
That's right. It's all about unity, Roz.